freedom is at stake.
People want freedom. They want to be able to hunt.
Liberty is the word.
Everything is going, our traditions, and this is what we're fighting for.
They marched in protest, a silent procession of a people grasping for one last chance to resist, shamefully admitting they only have themselves to blame for government policies that threaten their way of life, their security, and the future of democracy in Britain.
We've been very apathetic for years, and now we're paying the price for it.
It's a disgrace, really. And we've seen these fundamental liberties eroded in the last 20-odd years in England, all sorts of legislation that should never have appeared.
Sportsmen and shooters fooled by politicians into thinking that England's age-old tradition of fox hunting would never be targeted or banned, now realizing, perhaps too little too late, that their traditions are no more secure than their freedoms.
This isn't about banning fox hunting. This is about the liberty of the individual to choose for him or herself what they do.
A future that's in doubt, and the largest peaceful protest in British history to try to change that has got many asking, where were these voices 6 years ago when there was an outright ban on handguns and pistol shooters were forced to surrender their firearms, confiscated by the government to be destroyed?
We hear people saying the proposed ban on fox hunting is the thin end of the wedge. I am a pistol shooter. As far as I'm concerned, we've already swallowed the wedge. And where does it go next?
Liberties that have already been sacrificed for the politicians' false promise of a safer society. Gun bans that, as predicted, have simply backfired.
We've seen about a 40% increase in firearms crime since the ban was introduced. That is not a success in my book.
We need to be armed, you know, we're not safe any longer. Everything is changing.
It's very simple. The authorities have no way of controlling criminals, so they control the law-abiding, because we're an easy target.
And now, some members of Parliament are questioning the government's anti-gun agenda, an agenda that has, without a doubt, failed.
The use of weapons in crime has risen dramatically. And it's very difficult to get government departments to openly accept the fact.
Politicians refusing to face the facts, while the police are forced to every day.
It's totally out of control.
This police officer, who feared he'd lose his job for speaking out, asked to remain anonymous. He said for the first time ever, bobbies are carrying firearms, but they're still outgunned by criminals who can buy whatever they want on the black market.
Every officer now in this country gets issued with body armour. When I joined the police service back in the 80s, we didn't have any of this. We had a wooden truncheon and a set of chain link handcuffs. The firearms laws have been tightened up since. Why do we still need this equipment? Simply because the criminals have the weapons and they're prepared to use them.
Gun policy's gone tragically wrong, and police morale at an all-time low.
I feel let down by the politicians, by the senior management in the police, and I feel at present I cannot give the public the service they demand and expect.
And as this officer made very clear, it's a law built on a lie.
The politicians, basically, they have misled the public. They said, if we ban handguns, the country's going to be a safer place. They ban the handguns, the country is not a safer place. Why are British people not to be trusted? And I think that says a lot about the government.
Citizens left defenseless, now victims of the very laws passed to protect them, and asking how many more Tony Martins will there be. Martin, a Norfolk farmer, was forced to protect himself when no one else would, not the police and not the British justice system. What happened at this farmhouse owned by Tony Martin 4 years ago has struck a real nerve, not only in this country, but internationally. 2 men broke into Tony Martin's house. Both of them were shot. One of them was killed. And the man who fired that gun, Tony Martin, was initially sentenced to life in prison for murder. But many people think Tony Martin should never have spent 1 day in jail. They say he was just an innocent man protecting himself and his property.
Tony should not be in a jail, not for what he did. He was perfectly within his rights, in my view. to look after his own property and his own life.
My thoughts is that I would do exactly the same, put in the same situation. I would not hesitate to do exactly the same.
I personally believe that, you know, if you're in your own house and people come in, then they should expect whatever they get.
Everybody around was saying the same thing. You must have a right to defend yourself. It has gone too far, swung so far in favour of the criminal.
Criminals like those in Tony Martin's case, who were no strangers to the law. 16-year-old Fred Barris, who was killed, already had 29 convictions. And 30-year-old Brendan Farron had 34 convictions and had been in prison for burglary. He was sentenced to 3 years for trying to break into Tony Martin's home. But after only serving 18 months, he's free while Tony Martin remains in jail. And he's now threatening to sue Martin using taxpayers' dollars.
The system is on the side of the criminal, not on the side of the victim. Go and rob somebody and then sue them because they've damaged you. It's absurd.
The injustice of a justice system. And although Tony Martin has had his life sentence reduced to manslaughter, he still sits behind bars here at High Point Prison in Suffolk, England, counting the days until he's released. I was the first reporter from the United States allowed to visit with Tony since he's been in prison. And although no cameras were allowed, I was able to talk with Tony by phone. And what you're about to hear is Tony Martin in his own words about that fateful night.
Well, I've never really said it publicly before, but I've had a pretty raw deal. I personally think it's very, very wrong for somebody to have to live in their house in fear, but for some unknown reason, there are people in this country who don't know the difference between defending yourself, protecting yourself, and malice aforethought. I thought it was the people that came in the house that were malice aforethought.
Chief Constable of Norfolk said that Tony shouldn't have used his gun, that he should have yelled for help. Well, you've seen the isolated location. I could scream furthermore and nobody would hear me at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's just a nonsense, I do believe.
It could have quite well been the dead man, because there's no question. The police in this area is totally inadequate. I mean, we get little or no support.
Police protection, residents here say they can't count on, and they're fed up with being denied the right to defend themselves.
We've been broken into several times before, and most of the people around here at one stage or another has either been broken into or had an attempt to do so.
This wasn't the first time you had a problem.
No, that was the third time this year that somebody had broken the house, yeah. You actually become a prisoner in your own house.
I have every sympathy. I genuinely do. But I can't say that the law shouldn't be what the law was. What I can say now is that because of that, we ought to review that particular law.
I think the Americans have a saying about it's better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. Tony Martin tried that venture. He was judged. He is in prison. The story is not yet finished.
And neither is the story of a struggle to reclaim rights these honest citizens have already lost. Costly mistakes of trusting in a government that has left them unprotected. Their message to gun owners in America is simple. It will happen to you if you let it.
Jolly well could, and they ought to realise that. If they saw what we are seeing in this country, then they'll fight for it.
But if you don't do anything, you will lose your liberties, and make the effort. Don't be apathetic. Get out there and fight.
Learn from our experience and don't give an inch. Your Constitution matters, your freedom matters.
Pericles said it way before me. Freedom is only for those who have the guts to defend it.